All right, Shalom. Before I get started, Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahweh Shai, Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahweh Shai, Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahweh Shai, Kahala Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakodash. Secondly, I want to give double honors to all the elders and apostles throughout the four corners of the earth that's pushing this truth in all sincerity and righteousness in these last days. I also like to give double honors to the head and the elder, the man of Israel, Camp the Chazak, whom I teach under down here in Greenville, South Carolina. And I also like to give another shout out. Also, that 100% truth lies with the elders apostles, a great millstone, of course. And another shout out to you Israelite foreigners that's looking like the other heathen nations causing confusion, coming back to your heritage. And I also like to give another shout out to you sincere Akim, you brothers out there that's pushing this truth in all sincerity and righteousness in these last days. And lastly, shout out to you, a few Wathian, you sisters out there that stand in order and know what y'all need to do in these last days. All right, to y'all, like to say shalom. All right, now coming back through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Shai with another exhortation video. And basically, I was on TikTok scrolling, and I saw this Jake, he was basically talking about his experience of being, so-called black and so-called Hispanic, which, they would say is mixed, which, according to the scriptures, there's no such thing as being mixed. But he said a particular thing that, I was going to pretty much back him up on, because, he don't know nothing about the truth. Because if he did, he would have said something about this scripture. But what he said is making me do this video. And it's a lot, if y'all hearing those waves roar, did a little beach trip, so I'm kind of close to the ocean. Y'all hearing the waves roar, and I want to come out on the balcony and do a quick little listen, But anyway, like I was saying, he said something, that was gonna that I was gonna back him up on because it's scripture related. All right, because he was pretty much saying, I hear what he was saying. I'm gonna try to quote what he said. Matter of fact, I'm gonna just let him say it, and I'm just gonna get the scripture just to back him up, because you have somebody say, "Oh, you mix, you black and you Mexican." No, you are what your father is, man. So I'm gonna, play the clip for y'all.
Hey, this is kind of a controversial subject, you know what I'm saying? I'm mixed, right? I'm black and Mexican. My dad's black, my mom's Mexican. But I consider myself a black man, right? I get treated like a black man. People see me as a black man. If I was in a room with 1,000 men and they were like, all the black men stand up, I'm going to stand up. Because if I stood up they like all the Mexican men stand up and I stood up, they're going to be looking at me like, what the fuck? So what do you guys think? I always believed, I was always told you are what your dad is. You know what I'm saying? So my dad's a black man.
You see, he said, I was always told you are what your dad is. And that's exactly correct, man. You are what your father is. And I'm going to get the scripture, to back it up, what he was saying, man. Because that is factual. All right, that's scripture. You see, that's according to the scriptures, man. He's 100% right. But like I said, he don't know the truth, so he wouldn't bring out this scripture like I'm gonna bring it to y'all, man. And I'm gonna let it finish out.
I'm a black man. I know other people who are mixed. They might, let's say their mom's Mexican or their mom's white, and they weren't really raised around their dad's side. If their dad's black, then they might not identify as that. So it's different for everybody. But I want to know in the comments, what do you guys think about that? I'm half and half, but I consider myself a black man. Hey, this kind
see, according to this word, I would be considered mixed, but according to the scriptures, I'm not really mixed. I'm not mixed. I'm what my father is, and like he said, his mom is Hispanic, right? Which that's a part of the tribes. Either way it would have went, whether if he was Mexican or he still would have been an Israelite regardless, because both his parents Israelites. Whether if it would have been his dad being Mexican or his mom, his dad being black or Mexican, he still would have been an Israelite. So he would have been good either way. But you got cases where, the dad may be white. Let's just say, for example, if his dad was white and his mom was Mexican, right? Then he would have been an Edomite. Although, according to this word, he'd be so-called mixed. But according to, the scriptures, he would have been an Edomite if his dad was white. You see? Now, let's just say, for example, his dad black and his mom white. He an Israelite, because you are what your father is. So if his mom or dad, if his dad would have been like Puerto Rican, black, so I'm saying so-called black, so-called Puerto Rican, so-called Mexican, so-called Dominican, so-called Haitian, so-called Jamaican, either one of them 12 tribes, he would have been considered an Israelite. But if his parents anything besides those 12 tribes, then guess what? He a heathen, or he a Edomite, he a Chinese. But the point is, you are what your father is, man. You are what your father is. You come from the seed line of your father, not your mother. Because those Israelis, they like to say you are what your mother is, and that's wrong, right? That's nowhere in the scriptures, man. You see, you are what your father is at the end of the day. So, and like you said, I heard you say, and another thing too, you said, if I was to stand up when they said 100, if it was 100 Mexicans and I was to stand up, they'll look at him funny, which, that is true. They wouldn't look at him as Mexican. Although, because let's just say, for example, his dad was Mexican, his mom black. Either way it would have went, more than likely, no Mexicans wouldn't consider him a Mexican. They don't really consider you Mexican. In which, in a way they're right. But then again, they're wrong too, because you are with your fathers, but they don't understand that. But they'll consider him, if you're not full blown, in this world wise, in the ways of this world, if both your parents ain't Mexicans, more than likely they ain't gonna treat you like one of them. In a way. They ain't gonna look at him as being Mexican, you see, because they don't understand the scriptures. So let's back up what he was saying. This is the book of Numbers, chapter 1 and verse 18. It said, and they assembled all the congregation together on the first day of the second month, and they declared their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names from 20 years old and upward by their polls. You see that? It says, and they declared their pedigrees. We're going to get that word pedigrees in the blue letter. After their families by the house of their fathers. So you are what your fathers is. They went through their pedigrees through their fathers. Now let's, we're going to get it in the Google definition, because the blue letter, for some reason, tripping on that word. It's the word pedigree. It says the record of descending of an animal showing, no, it's the second one. The record ancestry, especially upper class ancestry of a person or family. You see, your lineage. See, that's a definition they got for it. Lineage. Your lineage go through your father, man. So when you listen, when you read Matthew's, the first chapter, it tell you the generations of Yahushua, and it had what? All man. When it got to it went through all the generations of Yahushua, man. It went through his pedigree, his lineage. You see, King David, Samson, I don't know why I can't get it. Start with an S. Solomon. I couldn't. King David, Solomon, Joseph, Yahushua. Not in that particular order, but I'm just saying that would be his lineage, man, by the pedigrees of his father. So that's why Yahushua came from the tribe of Judah, because of his lineage. His lineage went back to Judah. You see, because he is what his father is. Now, the scripture I don't think, could be wrong, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Mary came from the tribe of Judah as well, man. But, the reason, she got her lineage because of her father. Now, the women can't carry the lineage. They gotta they are who their father is, man, because they come from the seed of their father, man. You see? You gotta know these scriptures, man. Now that we got that out of the way, because now that we know that you are what your father is, by the pedigrees, your lineage, right, through your father, like I said, the scripture, he ain't really, quoted it, but he, referencing in a way. He say, I heard, that you are what your father is. He's absolutely correct. And I just backed them up on that, man. Now, you may have an example of the wheat and the tare. Now, you may have some of my people that actually look like they could be Israelite, but they're not Israelites. Because, like I said, it go through the seed line of your father. Like I was giving an example. Let's just say if his dad would have been Edomite and his mom was Mexican. more than likely he would have looked like, you know, a Latino in a way, you know, because of his mom, but not knowing that his dad is an Edomite, so he is what his father is, and that's when we get the parable of the wheat and the tare. And I'm gonna read it. For example, Blake Griffin's son. That would be an example of the wheat and the tare. Blake Griffin's son. Now this is Blake Griffin, you know, and his son. He look like an Edomite, right? He look like a whole Edomite, right? But and that's Blake Griffin as well. That's him, but that's his son. He look like a whole Edomite. Blake Griffin, he from the tribe of Levi, so he would be a Haitian. Now this is Blake Griffin dad. You see, Blake Griffin dad is a Haitian, and that's his mother. You see, she's an Edomite, but Blake Griffin, he's from the tribe of Levi. He don't look shit like Levi because most Levi are dark-skinned, very dark-skinned people. You see, but because of his mom being an Edomite, he look mixed. He's so-called mixed, but he's a Levite, right? He's a so-called Haitian. You see, so now that Blake Griffin got with the Edomite, that's why his son, because he was already light as it is, that's why his son came out looking like an Edomite. But guess what? He's a Jake. And that's why the Lord gave this parable, how you gonna, basically the wheat and the tare. I'm gonna read it. Matthew 13, verse 24. It says, in another parable, put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while man slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. Now the tares are right. It said his enemy came and sowed tares. The tares. Okay, this is a parable now, because if you look at a tare, all right, let's go. Tare and wheat, they look alike, right? They will look alike, but this, they look alike, but it's a difference in them. You see, the wheat is on the left and the tares are on the right. Right? It's a difference in them. But they look similar. So that's why it says, but while man slept, verse 25, but while man slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. So the tares would be considered the ones that's Edomites, but they look like, they look like Israelites. They look so-called black, they look so-called Hispanic, but they would be, a tare. They would be a heathen, is what it's saying. So the tares would be considered the heathens, and the Israelites would be considered the wheat. You see, verse 26. It says, but when the blade was sprung up, because when wheat and tares first, rise up, before they rise up, get fully grown, they look damn near alike. It says, verse 26, but when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. Verse 27, so the servant of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field, from whence then has it tares? See, so he confused, like, damn. They look alike, but it's a little difference in them. You see? Verse 28, he said unto them, an enemy had done this. The servant said unto him, would thou then that we go and gather them up? Verse 29, but he said, nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. It said, verse 30, this is the point. Let both grow up together until they harvest. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barns. You see, when it's time to harvest them, you're gonna see the difference. And how do we tell by the difference? Through their spirit. You see? So there's no such thing as mix. You see? People consider the wheat and the tare be like mixed because they mixed in. You see, the tares are mixed in, but you're going to tell the difference between a wheat and a tare, man. I had to bring that example out there because you may have the example of, well, what if I was white? What if my dad was white? Well, you would eat him, man. Well, what about my dad was a Chinese? Well, you're a Moabite. You know, what if my dad was so-called Japanese? Well, you're an Ammonite. You are what your father is, man. And there was something I was about to say on that point. For example, Bruce Lee. Some people may say he's a heathen, but according to his spirit, he has to be an Israelite, man. He has to. Like I gave you the example with Blake Griffin's son. You know, we go out the spirit, the way they carry themselves. That man Bruce Lee would have had to be an Israelite, man. He looked like he's so-called Chinese, right? A Moabite, but he had to be an Israelite. Now the tribe, I don't know, but more than likely he had to be an Israelite for whatever tribe he could have came from, you know. So, like that Jake said, man, you are what your father is, man. And if you look a certain way, don't let it discourage you. But if your spirit is a spirit of an Israelite, guess what? You're gonna be saved, man. So Lord, when this video was edifying, I'm gonna close it with giving our praise and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Rekha Kodash. Shalom until next time. Shalom.